The garden was bathed in the soft, golden light of a late afternoon sun, the kind of light that makes everything look like a memory even as it's happening. Fairy lights were already twinkling in the branches of the old oak tree, and the gentle murmur of conversation mixed with the clinking of champagne glasses. It was their engagement party, a picture-perfect celebration of what Eleanor believed was a picture-perfect love story. She watched Richard from across the lawn, her Richard, as he stood talking with his father. He looked impossibly handsome in his navy blue linen suit, a lock of his dark hair falling across his forehead just the way she liked. A smile played on her lips. This was real. The life she had always dreamed of was finally beginning. The diamond on her left hand felt heavy, a beautiful, tangible promise. It had been a surprise, of course. Richard was a man who loved grand gestures. He had proposed on a gondola in Venice, a ridiculously romantic cliché that had made her cry with joy. He was everything she had ever wanted. Charming, ambitious, from a good family. The Hamiltons were practically local royalty, their name etched onto the cornerstones of half the buildings in town. Marrying Richard wasn't just marrying a man, it was inheriting a legacy. For a girl who had grown up in a small apartment above a bakery, it felt like stepping into a fairy tale. She circulated, a gracious hostess, accepting congratulations and compliments on her ring. "It's stunning, Eleanor," a cousin of Richard's gushed. "He has impeccable taste." Eleanor simply smiled, a warm, genuine smile, because she believed it too. He had chosen her, after all. The party flowed around her in a happy, bubbly stream. She was refilling a tray of appetizers in the kitchen when she heard them. Richard's mother, Catherine, had a voice that could cut through glass, a crisp, aristocratic tone that always made Eleanor feel like she needed to straighten her posture. She was standing just outside the kitchen door, partially hidden by a large potted fern, and Richard was with her. "I just don't understand why this had to be so rushed, Richard," Catherine said, her voice a low, conspiratorial hiss. "A 6-month engagement? It's hardly enough time." "Mother, we've been over this," Richard replied. His tone was placating, the one he used when he was trying to manage his mother's moods. "I love her. We want to get married. What's the point in waiting?" Eleanor froze, her hand hovering over a small pastry. She knew she shouldn't be listening. It was a private conversation. But she was rooted to the spot, a sudden cold knot tightening in her stomach. Catherine let out a sigh, a sound filled with a world of disapproval. "Love? Richard, please. You're infatuated. She's different. I'll grant you that. A novelty. But is she really the woman you want beside you for the rest of your life? Think of our family, of your future." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. A novelty. The word struck her like a physical blow. She had always felt a little out of place among the Hamiltons, with their inherited wealth and effortless sophistication. She had tried so hard to fit in, to prove she was worthy. But to Catherine, she was just a curiosity. She waited for Richard to defend her. She waited for him to tell his mother that she was wrong, that Eleanor was the love of his life, the only woman for him. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic, desperate drumbeat. And then he spoke. The words were quiet, meant only for his mother's ears, but Eleanor heard them as clearly as if he had shouted them from the rooftops. "Don't worry, Mother," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "It's just a phase. She's just a phase." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The knot in her stomach turned to ice, spreading a chilling numbness through her entire body. A phase. Like a rebellious haircut or a brief flirtation with a questionable hobby. All of it. The grand gestures, the whispered promises, the diamond on her finger, it was all just a temporary diversion for him. A story he would one day tell with a wry, dismissive smile. She wasn't his future. She was just a chapter he was planning to finish. She looked down at her hand, at the ring. The brilliant diamond, once a symbol of a beautiful promise, now seemed to mock her, a glittering lie. She could feel the blood draining from her face. In the background, she could hear the laughter and music from the party, a surreal soundtrack to the moment her world fell apart. She had to get out, before she shattered into a million pieces right there on the kitchen floor. For a long moment, Eleanor simply stood there, hidden by the fern, the porcelain tray of pastries still in her hands. She felt strangely disconnected from her own body, an observer watching a scene unfold. Outside, the party continued, oblivious. Inside, in the silent, sterile kitchen, a life had just ended. The life she thought was hers. Her first instinct was not to scream or cry, but to become invisible. She set the tray down on the steel counter with a quiet, deliberate click. Her movements were slow, almost dreamlike. She backed away from the doorway, deeper into the shadows of the kitchen and slipped out the back service door, a door she had only ever seen the catering staff use. The cool night air was a shock to her skin. She found herself in a small, manicured herb garden, the scent of rosemary and thyme heavy in the air. The sounds of the party were softer here, muted. She didn't look back. She walked, her silver heels sinking slightly into the soft earth, around the side of the grand Hamilton house, past the manicured hedges and the glowing swimming pool, until she reached the long gravel driveway. Her own modest car was parked at the very end, almost an afterthought among the fleet of luxury vehicles. The drive home was a blur. She didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears, a hollow ache in the center of her chest. Richard's words echoed in her mind. A cruel, relentless loop. Just a phase. Just a phase. She's just a phase. Each word was a new betrayal. It wasn't just that he had lied to her. It was the casual, dismissive way he had said it. The ease with which he had reduced their entire relationship, their shared jokes, their late-night conversations, their future plans, into a temporary amusement. He wasn't heartbroken about deceiving her. He was merely managing his mother. Eleanor wasn't a person he loved, but a situation he had to handle. The novelty Catherine had spoken of. The girl from the other side of the tracks. A fun diversion before he settled down with someone more appropriate. Someone who wasn't a phase. She finally pulled up to her apartment, the one above the bakery where she had grown up. The smell of cooling bread, a scent that had always meant comfort and home, greeted her as she stepped out of the car. Tonight it just smelled like the real world, a world she had been so eager to leave behind for Richard's glittering fantasy. Inside, she leaned against the closed door, the silence of her small apartment a stark contrast to the noise of the party. It was her space, filled with her things, secondhand books, mismatched furniture she'd lovingly restored, paintings by local artists. It was humble, but it was honest. It was real. Unlike the life she had been pretending to live, her gaze fell upon her hand. The ring. It caught the dim light from the street lamp outside, throwing tiny, sharp rainbows onto the wall. For a moment she was tempted to pull it off, to hurl it against the wall and watch the symbol of his lie shatter. But then, a different feeling began to surface, rising through the numbness and the pain. A cold, hard anger. He had called her a phase. He had, in his own mind, already placed an expiration date on her love, on her worth. This ring wasn't a promise of a future, it was a payment. A very expensive payment for services rendered. The service of being his beautiful, charming, slightly out-of-place fiancé for a few months. The service of making him feel adventurous and rebellious before he inevitably returned to his own world. A quiet, determined resolve settled over her. He had already written her off. He and his mother had discussed her as if she were a poor investment. Fine. She would collect the severance. She walked into her bedroom and stood in front of the full-length mirror. The woman in the elegant silk dress looked like a stranger. A doll dressed up for a part she no longer wanted to play. Slowly, deliberately, she unzipped the dress and let it pool at her feet. She stepped out of it, leaving it there like a shed skin. She stood for a moment in her simple undergarments, looking at herself. She saw not the broken-hearted fiancé, but a woman who had been fooled, yes, but who would not be broken. She looked at the ring again, still sparkling on her finger. It wasn't a symbol of love, but it was a symbol of what this experience had cost her. It was the price of the lesson she had just learned. A very expensive, very painful lesson, and she would keep it. She would keep it as a reminder of her own worth and of the cost of ever letting anyone else define it for her again. The fairy tale was over. It was time to write her own story. The morning sun sliced through the thin curtains of her bedroom, a stark, unforgiving light. Eleanor hadn't slept. She had spent the night in a state of suspended animation, sitting on her worn velvet armchair, watching the sky slowly change from inky black to a bruised purple, then finally to a pale, indifferent blue. Her phone, which she had silenced and placed on the coffee table, had been a constant dark presence. It buzzed and lit up sporadically through the night, a frantic, unanswered beacon from a world she no longer belonged to. Now, in the full light of day, she picked it up. 22 missed calls from Richard, a dozen more from his sister, probably dispatched by a panicked Catherine. The text messages were a timeline of his escalating confusion and irritation. 11:47 p.m. Hey, where did you go? Feeling okay? 12:15 a.m. Eleanor, people are asking for you. This isn't funny. 1:30 a.m. I'm getting worried. Please just let me know you're safe. 3 a.m. My mother is furious. You've made a scene. Whatever this is about, you're handling it like a child. 7:15 a.m. Eleanor, I swear to God, if you don't answer this phone right now. She read them all with a strange detachment. There was no concern in his words, not really. There was annoyance, entitlement, and the wounded pride of a man whose perfect party had been spoiled. He wasn't worried about her heart. He was worried about his reputation. He wasn't afraid of losing her. He was afraid of losing control. Her fingers, steady now, moved across the screen. She had thought about what to say all night, composing and deleting 100 different replies in her head. Angry diatribes, heartbroken pleas, pages of accusations. But in the quiet light of morning, she knew that none of that was necessary. He didn't deserve her words. He didn't deserve her pain. All he deserved was the simple, cold truth. She opened a new message to him. Richard, the engagement is off. I overheard your conversation with your mother. Consider the ring my severance package for the phase. I wish you the best in finding someone more permanent. Goodbye. She pressed send before she could second-guess herself. The message was delivered instantly. Not a second later, her phone began to ring. Richard's face, smiling from a picture they'd taken in Italy, filled the screen. She watched the call for a moment, then declined it. He called back immediately. She declined again. Then the text started, a rapid-fire explosion of fury and disbelief. What the hell are you talking about? You can't be serious. Overheard what? My mother was just being my mother. Severance package? Are you insane? That ring is a family heirloom. Eleanor, you will give that ring back. This is theft. Theft. The word almost made her laugh. He was worried about the ring. Of course he was. The money, the asset, the family heirloom. That was the real loss to him. She, Eleanor, was just a phase, an easily replaceable component. The ring, however, had value. With a sense of calm she hadn't felt in months, she blocked his number. Then she blocked his mother's. Then his sisters, his father's, and the numbers of 2 of his closest friends she knew would be enlisted to contact her. One by one, she digitally erased the Hamiltons from her life. It was a brutal, efficient amputation. Then, and only then, did the tears come. Not the hot, angry tears from the night before, but slow, mournful tears for the woman she had been. The naive, hopeful woman who had truly believed in the fairy tale. She mourned that woman, mourned the love she thought she had, and mourned the future that had turned out to be a lie. She let herself cry for exactly 10 minutes. When she was done, she washed her face, the cold water a welcome shock. She looked at her reflection. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her gaze was clear. It was time to call in her real family. She dialed the number of her best friend, Chloe. Chloe answered on the second ring. Hey, you, Chloe's cheerful voice chirped. How was the big party? Do I have to start calling you Mrs. Hamilton now? The engagement is off, Eleanor said, her voice flat. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Say that again. It's over. I left him. Okay, Chloe said, her tone shifting immediately from cheerful to serious. I have 2 questions. 1, are you okay? And 2, what did the bastard do? Can you come over? Eleanor asked, her voice cracking slightly. And bring coffee, the good kind. I'm already putting my shoes on, Chloe replied. Don't move. I'll be there in 15. Chloe arrived in 12 minutes, a whirlwind of righteous fury and comfort. She burst through the door holding a tray with 2 large coffees from their favorite cafe and a paper bag that smelled deliciously of warm croissants. She took one look at Eleanor's pale face and red-rimmed eyes, set the tray down with a thud, and pulled her into a fierce hug. Talk to me, she said, her voice muffled by Eleanor's hair. Tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail. And so, Eleanor did. Curled up on her sofa, nursing the warm coffee mug, she recounted the entire humiliating story. The fairy lights in the garden, the perfect image of Richard across the lawn, the sound of Catherine's cutting voice, and the final, devastating blow of Richard's casual dismissal. She's just a phase. As she said the words out loud to her friend, a fresh wave of pain and anger washed over her. Chloe listened intently, her expression growing darker with every word. She was a lawyer, and her mind worked in terms of justice and retribution. When Eleanor finished, Chloe was silent for a long moment, her jaw tight. A phase, she finally said, her voice dangerously quiet. He stood there, at your engagement party, wearing the suit you picked out, and told his mother that you were a phase? Eleanor nodded, swallowing hard. And now he wants the ring back? Chloe's eyes flashed. The ring he gave you as a promise of a future he had no intention of actually having? Oh no, no. He doesn't get to do that. She stood up and began pacing the small living room. This isn't theft, Elle. This is damages. Emotional, psychological, and reputational damages. He didn't just lie to you, he committed fraud. He entered into a contract, a betrothal, under false pretenses. I blocked him, Eleanor said quietly. And his family. Good, Chloe said, nodding sharply. That's step 1. Now for step 2. She stopped pacing and looked at Eleanor, a plan already forming in her eyes. We sell the ring. Eleanor stared at her. Sell it? The thought hadn't even occurred to her. She had been focused on keeping it, a private symbol of her lesson learned. Yes, we take that family heirloom and turn it into your fresh start fund. A down payment on a new life. Think of it, Elle. The poetic justice. He used his family's money to trap you in a lie, and you'll use it to set yourself free. It's brilliant. A small, genuine smile touched Eleanor's lips for the first time in nearly 24 hours. The idea was audacious, terrifying, and utterly perfect. He would lose his mind, she whispered. That's the entire point. Chloe grinned, grabbing a croissant from the bag. Let him. Let the whole Hamilton clan lose their collective minds. They treated you like a temporary accessory. Now that accessory is going to liquidate herself. The conversation was a lifeline. With Chloe beside her, the suffocating loneliness began to recede, replaced by a spark of defiant energy. They spent the next hour brainstorming. Chloe, with her legal mind, was already mapping out the potential challenges. Richard could sue, of course. He could claim the ring was a conditional gift, the condition being the marriage. But we have a very strong counter-argument, Chloe explained, ticking points off on her fingers. We have the public humiliation. We have your testimony of his fraudulent promise. He would have to admit, in a deposition, what he said to his mother. He would have to expose his own duplicity. The Hamiltons, with their precious reputation, will not want that dirty laundry aired in public. He's counting on you being too heartbroken and intimidated to fight back. He's about to find out how wrong he is. As if on cue, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed on her apartment door. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was loud, impatient, demanding. Eleanor and Chloe froze, looking at each other. They both knew it wasn't a neighbor. They could hear the faint, expensive scent of cologne wafting from under the door. Don't answer it, Chloe mouthed, her eyes wide. Eleanor slowly got up and crept toward the door, peering through the peephole. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was Richard. He stood there, jaw clenched, face flushed with anger. He looked nothing like the charming man from the party. This was the real Richard, the one whose will had been crossed. He knocked again, harder this time. Eleanor, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. We need to talk about this like adults. Like adults. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He wanted to act like an adult now that his toy had been taken away. Eleanor stood her ground, her back pressed against the wall beside the door. Chloe stood beside her, a silent, supportive soldier. They just waited, listening to him knock and call her name, his voice growing more and more agitated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they heard his frustrated sigh, a string of curses under his breath, and the sound of his expensive shoes retreating down the wooden stairs. Eleanor let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She looked at Chloe, and a newfound resolve hardened in her eyes. Chloe's audacious plan was no longer just a fantasy. It was a necessity. This was a war now, and the ring was her only weapon. Okay, Eleanor said, her voice firm and clear. Let's find a jeweler. The next day, Eleanor and Chloe walked into a high-end, discreet jeweler in the city's most exclusive district. It was the kind of place with no jewelry in the window, only a single, elegant name etched in gold on the black door. This was Chloe's idea. You don't take a diamond like that to a pawn shop, she had said. You take it to someone who understands its value and who values discretion. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she sat in the plush private viewing room. The jeweler, a quiet man with kind eyes named Mr. Alistair, treated her with gentle respect. He didn't ask questions. He simply placed a velvet tray on the polished wooden table between them. With a deep breath, Eleanor twisted the ring off her finger. It felt strangely light in her palm after being a heavy weight on her hand for so long. She placed it on the tray. Under the bright, focused lights of the office, the diamond seemed to explode with fire, a cold, brilliant spectacle. It looked impossibly beautiful and impossibly foreign. It had never really been hers. Mr. Alistair examined it through his loupe, his expression unreadable. He checked the clarity, the cut, the carat, referencing a small certificate Eleanor hadn't even known came with it. After a long silence, he looked up. It's a magnificent stone, he said softly. From a very well-known house. Its provenance is impeccable. He quoted a number that made Eleanor's breath catch in her throat. It was more money than her father had earned in the last 10 years combined. It was a life-changing amount of money. "We can wire the funds to your account within the hour," he said simply. Eleanor looked at Chloe, whose eyes were shining with triumph. This was it. The point of no return. The hollow ache in her chest was still there, but now it was mixed with a terrifying, exhilarating sense of freedom. She nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Yes, please do that." The fallout was swift and predictable. A week later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived, delivered by courier. It was a letter from the Hamilton family's legal firm. The language was cold and threatening, demanding the immediate return of the heirloom ring to avoid legal proceedings, citing conditional gift law and hinting at criminal charges for theft. Eleanor's hands shook as she read it, but Chloe just laughed. "It's a bluff," she said, scanning the letter with a professional eye. "A very expensive, very intimidating bluff. They're trying to scare you into submission. They will never let this go to court." Chloe drafted a response herself. It was a masterpiece of legal precision and veiled threat. It detailed Richard's fraudulent misrepresentation of the engagement, quoted the exact phrase, "just a phase," as a direct statement of his intent, and noted their possession of a witness, Eleanor, who had overheard it. The letter concluded by stating that if the Hamiltons chose to pursue the matter legally, Eleanor was fully prepared to file a countersuit for emotional distress and public humiliation, and that she would have no choice but to answer all questions truthfully during a public deposition. They sent the letter and waited. For 2 weeks, the silence was deafening. Then, a final brief letter arrived from the lawyers. "Our client has chosen not to pursue this matter further at this time." It was over. They had backed down. Their reputation was worth more to them than the ring. Just as Chloe predicted, Eleanor never saw Richard again. She heard whispers through the grapevine that he was furious, humiliated, that Catherine Hamilton told everyone Eleanor was an unstable gold digger. Eleanor didn't care. Let them say what they wanted. She had the truth, and she had the capital. She didn't spend the money on designer clothes or a fancy car. She walked downstairs to the dusty, vacant storefront below her apartment, the one that had been a struggling bookstore for years. She found the owner, an elderly man ready to retire, and she made him an offer. 2 months later, the for lease sign came down, replaced by a new one, hand-painted in elegant script, "The Eleanor Project." She poured her heart and the money from the ring into it. It wasn't just a shop. It was a space dedicated to restored and reclaimed things. She found old, forgotten furniture and lovingly brought it back to life. She partnered with local artists and displayed their paintings on the walls. It became a place of second chances, a celebration of finding beauty in things that others had discarded. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after the engagement party, she stood behind the counter of her thriving shop, the scent of wood polish and fresh paint in the air. The afternoon sun, the same golden light from that fateful day in the garden, streamed through her own storefront window. A customer was admiring a small, beautifully restored writing desk. "It's just lovely," the woman said. "It's like you gave it a whole new story." Eleanor smiled, a real deep smile that reached her eyes. "That's the idea," she said. She looked down at her own hands, busy and capable. There was no diamond. There was no glittering lie. Her hands were bare, and she had never felt so rich. She hadn't married into a legacy. She had built her own, piece by piece, from the ashes of a broken promise.